and welcome to another video by me, Tubbyengineer. Now today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on building a nickel microcoil. Now I know many people have said that you can't build nickel microcoils, or that they collapse, they won't stand dry burning or any kind of heat. Well, I'm going to show you how I do it, and I've managed to make coils that will stand up to most things. Now, it should be mentioned that they're still nickel and they still are more fragile than candle coils. But the way I build them, I get pretty much perfect results every time, and the only real problems I have are with wicking. Now, when I say I have problems with wicking, if I put too much wick in, I find you get a cold, weak vape. Obviously, you know, how much wick you put in depends on the internal diameter of your coil, what have you. Now, during the video you'll see me dry burning the coil and squeezing it. Now, normally I wouldn't get the coil quite as hot as I did in this video, but I wanted to show you that it would stand up to that kind of treatment. Normally I fire them until I can just start to see them glowing slightly red, just to see if there's any hot spots in the coil, as you would any normal microcoil. So we'll go to the tutorial now. I'll show you how it's done, then I'll come back and show you how it vapes and just talk a little more about it. Okay, so these are the tools I use for building coils. Now we have 0.25 and 0.4mm tempered nickel from Stealth Vape, Muji cotton, coiling jig, scissors that I bought from just cheap scissors that I bought from a supermarket, some pliers for pulling the nickel tight, tweezers for fiddling with the Muji when I'm fitting the wick, a small Phillips screwdriver, and a pair of flush side cutters. Now I got these from Amazon for $4.95. Okay, since I'm doing a twisted 0.25mm coil, I'll also be using this drill to twist the nickel. Now, just so that you know how I do it, I actually use this little hook which simply fastens into the chuck. Just tighten it up into the middle of the chuck, and when you spin it, it runs around perfectly in the centre and lets you twist the wire easily. Right, so I'll just move these tools out of the way and I'll show you how I twist the nickel wire, and then I'll start building the coil. As you are no doubt aware, nickel is pretty springy and elastic. Now, one of the problems you get is when you're trying to do twisted coils, the stuff just rolls itself up in a mess like that. Now what I've done is taken it off the reel and twisted the cut ends together. Now all I do is get the cutters and drop them in the loop and pull. Now you can see as I'm pulling, it's developing a kink there. So you just need to stop that kink from forming. And you can pull the wire more or less out straight. Hook your finger behind it and just drop the pliers. Then, this is difficult on camera, get your drill with the little hook in it and hook the wire over the little hook. Now this is just a regular screw-in hook from any hardware shop, and I then put my finger in the other end, activate the drill and start twisting. Right, once you've hooked your wire onto the hook of the drill, just hold the wire out straight and start twisting. Watching me twist the whole length of wire is going to be pretty boring, so I'll just show you this last bit. I twist around my fingertips and I just keep twisting and twisting and twisting. Now, that's going to be pretty difficult to see, so I will make a close-up of it in a second. Right, there you go. So that is the kind of pitch I twist this wire to. Now, you'll see if I lay it down flat on here, you will see that now it's twisted, it actually falls pretty straight. Okay, so I've zoomed in really close so you can see the wire and the way I've twisted it. Now, you'll see at this end there is a little loop, and I just snip that off with the cutters to one side. At the other end you've got this rather ragged bit where I was holding it when it was twisting, so I snip that off at the end. And I've now got an easy to work with length of wire. Right, this is my coiling jig. Now, you can use any coiling jig. This is just the one I work with. Now, on this, I simply drop the wire in the little hole there and tighten the screw so that it's held tight. Pull tight and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now, once I've got 11 wraps around it, I press it down slightly, hold it out, take the pliers, I grip and pull, just because this nickel is so springy. Once you've pulled it a bit, you'll find it wants to unwrap itself, so I then push it around a bit more until it holds pretty much the shape I'm after. Now, as I'm coiling a heron, I want the legs going in opposite directions. So that's the basics of the coil wound. Right, so that's the wound coil, and the next step I do is to just fit it on whatever you used to wind it, or a screwdriver, a rod of some suitable size, just to support the coil while you're fitting it and to make it easy to work with. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is fit the coil to the heron base. So I'll start with the front leg first. wrap it around, tighten it up, spin the thing round. Now I usually take the little mandrel out and pop it around the other way. I just feel it helps me keep the shape of the coil a bit better. Tighten it up. And that's it in place. Now I shall pop it on the device and see what resistance we get. Okay, we've got the coil on the device and it's showing a resistance of 0.91, 0.90. So what I shall do now is fire this a little. And you can see that some of the coil has changed colour and it's certainly given off a little smoke. Now, what I'm going to do is take the tool I used originally for the size of the coil, push it through and stretch the coil up. Now you need to do it slightly carefully, otherwise you can make it grip the mandrel and you won't get it back out again without destroying the coil. So a little gentle pull. That feels fine. And you can see I've actually got quite a lot of leg spare now. So what I shall do is take this back off the device, pop it on the coiling jig and neaten those legs up. Okay, so I've got it back on the coiling jig and I'm just going to pop the screwdriver through to support the coil. Loosen the first screw. And you're literally just taking up the slack. Turn that screw down, pull the leg out to the side, screwdriver through again, loosen the screw, pull the leg out and round, tighten it up, and you can see that's starting to grip the shaft of the screwdriver slightly. At this point you can adjust the position by rolling the coil slightly in either direction. Then just pull your tool out. Still needs a little bit of a tweak. Also at this point, if you think you need a bit more space, you can loosen the screw slightly. Just to give yourself a little more wiggle room. Okay, so I'm reasonably happy with that. Although I may well just jiggle the coil a little more when I can look at it closely. It's difficult under the camera. Okay, so I did adjust the coil position ever so slightly just to make sure that I'd cleared the screws on both sides. Right, so having got the coil in place, I'm just going to clip the legs off. And I've now got the device in power mode. So if you can see that, it's firing in power mode. Now, the reason behind that is I want to show you that once these are built properly, or at least built this way, should I say, there is no proper way to build coils. You can get the coil hot. You can see it starting to glow there. A little bit of dry burning. Pinch the coil. Now, we're looking like we've got a bit of a dry wrap there. So if I just brush the top of the coil like that. And fire. I think we have ourselves a working coil. Right. Right, we've got a working coil, so now it's time to put the wick in. Now, I wick with Muji cotton in the heron, and I don't use a filler, I just use cotton and tank with liquid in. So I will just get my pad of Muji. Now I cut what's actually quite a narrow piece. Like that. You can see, I might actually think that's a bit thick, but I then peel off the cover on one side. Just settle the cotton a bit. And I'll pinch it. And I'm going to take off a little more cotton on this side because I actually want this quite thin. Now, that's about right. So, twist one end up tight, give it a little pull, just to tighten everything up. Now twist the other end up tight. Basically you want two pointy ends. Device. Now I'm going to use the very pointy end to thread through the coil. Now I can just feel that, just ever so slightly pulling the coil. Might even be a bit tight for me, that. I'll just stretch it slightly. That's about right, it should be okay. Thread the tank ring on. When you're reassembling one of these, you must make sure this tank ring goes all the way down. If you don't, the tank and top plate can spin and it will strangle your wick, which will give you problems later on. Cut the end off. And just took the loose cotton down there. Right, so it's time to prime the coil. Now I'm using Mr. Kraken's Shade, which is my favourite all-day vape. And I simply wet the cotton at the end and a bit onto the coil. Now, fitting the top plate. Right, when you fit the top plate, it's important that you get it lined up properly. So you put the cap over, pull the cotton up, and then I tip the cap up and check the alignment of the wick hole with the coil. I then drop the cap back on, and if you can see, I'm just resting it on the flat on the O-ring. I'll stand it up, hold it like that, and I just pull the coil, the wick, gently so that it's tight, and then snap the cover plate down. That will then give you a nice little bit of space under the top cap with the wick so that it doesn't strangle on the way into the coil. Then I trim it off pointy, as advised by many other people. Tank. Put that one to one side a moment while I fill the tank. Well, that's virtually my last fill of shade, so I will have to be careful how I vape this. Now, because I'm ever so slightly twitchy about these things, I'm just making sure I line the tank logo up with one side of the device. Drop it on the tank. Give everything a wipe. Now, it's obviously in power mode, so just display power and dual. Switch it back to dual mode. 20 joules, 340 degrees. Maybe that on. Yeah, no, it's in powerful mode, so I want to set it to standard mode. 20 joules. I'm just going to lock this resistance again just to make sure. Set resistance 0.119. Right, well, that's the coil built, Piatti wicked and filled. Now, I'm sure I showed you in the build tutorial, but I'll just hold this up to the camera and focus in. You should be able to see there that it's running at 20 joules and 350 Fahrenheit. Now, I'm going to give it a vape and show you how it works. There you go. As you can see, working fine. Now, obviously, this is a heron, and it's not noted for being a cloud atty. It's also got pretty restricted airflow, and you can only really fit a single coil in, as you saw from the build video. Now, the method I've used will work with twisted 0.25. It will also work with single strand builds. The only difference is you just use a single strand instead of the twisted. Now, I only use 0.4 for single strands, although I am at some point going to try a 0.25 single strand build, and I may well try 0.3. Now, for those of you who are wondering whether this build only works in herons, I've used it in Vigo drippers, K-Fun 4, K-Fun Light, Typhoon GT2, 2 or 3 other dripping atomizers whose names... Oh, yes. I've tried it in a Trident, bit restricted space in a Trident, obviously, but I managed to fit it in. And a clone... It was a clone Mephisto that I borrowed off someone for a day or two. Now, I'm perfectly happy using it on my heron. In fact, I've got 2 herons. As I've said, you can apply the same technique to pretty much any atomizer. The most important bit seems to be the stretching of the coil to take out any slack. If you don't stretch the coil, when you fire it, it will sag and you'll just end up with a mess. If you stretch the coil after you've warmed it a bit, it seems to hold together. Now, I'll also note that it also seems to work best with the tempered nickel that I bought from Stealth Vape. Although you can use it with the annealed nickel that you get from some other places. The annealed nickel is a little softer and can be a bit more twitchy to work with. I prefer the tempered. Well, I hope you found this tutorial useful. I've been Tubbyengineer, and thank you very much for watching. Bye now.